The Fontainebleau Hotel stood like a pastel monument to American excess along the Miami Beach shoreline, its curved facade catching the late afternoon sun. Inside the grand ballroom, 200 guests celebrated the wedding of Rebecca Hartman and Thomas DiCarlo, a young couple whose love story had nothing to do with geopolitics and everything to do with chance. They'd met at a Dolphins game 2 years earlier. Victor Reyes adjusted his camera rig for the third time that hour, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief already damp from the oppressive August humidity. A Cuban exile who'd arrived in Miami during the Mariel boat lift 3 years prior, Victor had built a modest videography business catering to the city's growing wedding industry. His equipment, a JVC-GR C1 camcorder, one of the first consumer models with a built-in VHS recorder, represented his entire life savings. "Keep it rolling during cocktail hour," the bride's mother had insisted, pressing an extra $100 into his palm that morning. "I want everything. Every moment, every face, every smile." Victor obliged. The camera swept across the reception, capturing champagne toasts, awkward dancing, children chasing each other between tables draped in white linen. The lens didn't discriminate. It recorded the mundane alongside the meaningful, the background as faithfully as the foreground. At 6:47 p.m., according to the timestamp burned into the lower right corner of the frame, the camera panned across a cluster of guests near the terrace entrance. An older man in a gray suit, later identified only as Subject Alpha in FBI reports, stood speaking with a younger woman in a teal dress. Their conversation appeared unremarkable. They held cocktails. They smiled. They gestured toward the ocean visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. But their hands moved in patterns too precise to be accidental. The man's right index finger tapped his glass 3 times. The woman adjusted her pearl necklace, thumb and forefinger pinching the clasp. The man nodded, then turned slightly, his body language creating a deliberate opening in their small circle. A third individual, a heavy-set man with a mustache, wearing a photographer's vest despite carrying no camera, stepped into frame for exactly 11 seconds. The exchange happened so smoothly that even Victor, watching through his viewfinder, noticed nothing unusual. The heavy-set man's hand brushed against the older man's jacket as they passed. A folded newspaper transferred from one palm to another, the motion disguised as a casual gesture, a polite "excuse me" in a crowded space. Then the third man disappeared into the terrace crowd, and the couple in gray and teal continued their conversation as if nothing had happened. Victor kept filming. The bride threw her bouquet. The DJ played Celebration by Kool and the Gang. By midnight, the last guest stumbled toward waiting taxis, and Victor packed his equipment, his feet aching, his mind already on the next weekend's bookings. He had no idea he'd just documented what would become one of the most analyzed pieces of surveillance footage in FBI counterintelligence history. 3 weeks later, a different kind of analyst would watch those same 11 seconds in a windowless room at the FBI's Miami field office, rewinding the tape until a magnetic ribbon threatened to snap, try to understand how a wedding videographer had accidentally accomplished what an entire surveillance team had failed to achieve for 18 months. Capturing visual evidence of a KGB dead drop operation on American soil during the height of Cold War tensions. But that revelation still lay ahead, hidden in plain sight on a VHS tape sitting in Victor Reyes' apartment, waiting to be edited into a wedding memory the DiCarlo family would treasure forever, unaware that intelligence officers would soon be requesting copies for reasons that had nothing to do with matrimony and everything to do with national security. The Cold War, everyone believed, was winding down. Détente had softened the edges of superpower confrontation. The Soviet Union, under new leadership, spoke of glasnost and perestroika. But in Miami, a city thick with exiles, emigre communities, and the ghosts of the Bay of Pigs, the intelligence war continued with the same intensity it had maintained since the 1960s. Soviet intelligence hadn't abandoned its American operations. It had simply adapted them, moving from the dramatic embassy encounters and brush passes of earlier decades to something more subtle, more embedded, more patient. The KGB's illegals program, deep cover operatives living under assumed American identities, sometimes for years, represented the long game of espionage, a bet that even as political climates thawed, the fundamental competition between systems would continue. Miami offered unique advantages for such operations. Its diverse population provided cover. Its proximity to Latin America created plausible explanations for unusual travel patterns. Its thriving tourism industry meant strangers constantly moved to the city, their presence unremarkable, and its weddings, hundreds every weekend. Each one a gathering of people who mostly didn't know each other, who asked few questions, who focused on celebration rather than scrutiny, provided perfect environments for brief, anonymous contact. The KGB had been using wedding receptions as meeting sites for nearly 2 years before Victor Reyes's camera caught them. Intelligence analysts would later identify at least 7 other Miami weddings where similar exchanges likely occurred. All of them lost to history because no one happened to be filming the right corner of the room at the right moment. But on August 14, 1983, chance and circumstance converged. A bride's mother wanted comprehensive documentation. A videographer needed the money. A camera captured everything. And 3 Soviet intelligence operatives made a mistake they'd been trained their entire careers to avoid. They assumed the background was safe because no one was watching it. Special Agent Caroline Brenner had been with the FBI's Counterintelligence Division for 11 years, long enough to recognize that the most significant breaks in espionage cases rarely announce themselves with drama. They arrived in manila folders, in overheard conversations, in the peripheral details of unrelated investigations. Fragments that only made sense when someone bothered to connect them. The wedding tape arrived on her desk by accident, a bureaucratic error that would later seem like providence. FBI surveillance teams have been tracking Subject Alpha, real name still classified, identified in declassified documents only as a foreign national of interest since March 1982. The initial flagging came from the State Department. Unusual visa patterns, a professional history that didn't quite align with his stated employment, phone calls and numbers associated with known Soviet contacts in New York and Washington. But surveillance had produced nothing actionable. Alpha was careful. He varied his routes. He used payphones. He never met the same person twice in the same location. Traditional counterintelligence methods, physical tails, wiretaps, photographic surveillance, had documented his movements but revealed no clear evidence of espionage activity. Then, on September 7th, a junior analyst processing routine surveillance photographs from August noticed something. Subject Alpha leaving the Fontainebleau Hotel on the evening of the 14th. The same night agents had lost track of him for approximately 4 hours due to a scheduling conflict that left his apartment unwatched. The surveillance log noted the gap. The photograph proved he'd been at the hotel. But why? Alpha wasn't registered as a guest. He had no apparent connection to any event scheduled that evening. Standard procedure required follow-up, so the analyst contacted the Fontainebleau's management, requesting records of all functions held on August 14th. The list included a corporate conference, a quinceañera, and the Hartman D. Carlo wedding reception. Pull guest list for all 3 events, Brenner instructed when the information reached her desk. Cross-reference against our databases. Let's see if Alpha had any reason to be there. The corporate conference yielded nothing. Alpha's name appeared nowhere in the attendee records, and the company involved had no connection to his covered profession. The quinceañera was a family affair, no outsiders. That left the wedding. Rebecca Hartman's mother, when contacted by an agent claiming to investigate a potential credit card fraud at the hotel, was eager to help. Yes, they'd hired a videographer. Yes, she still had his number. Yes, she'd be happy to request a copy of the raw footage, all of it, including the parts that didn't make it into the final edited version delivered to the couple. Victor Reyes, confused but cooperative when the FBI agent appeared at his small studio apartment, handed over the complete VS, recording without hesitation. He'd done nothing wrong. He had nothing to hide. If the government needed to see a wedding video for some investigation he didn't understand, that was fine. He hoped whatever they were looking for would help someone. Brenner watched the footage alone first, in her office, on a standard VCR connected to a 19-inch television. She fast-forwarded through the ceremony, slowed during the reception, watching faces, looking for Alpha, trying to understand what had drawn a suspected foreign intelligence operative to a stranger's wedding. She found him at the 6:47 p.m. mark, gray suit, cocktail in hand, speaking with a woman in teal. Her pulse quickened, Not because anything looked obviously incriminating, but because Alpha was there, present, engaged in conversation at the exact time he disappeared from surveillance. Then she saw the third man, the brush pass, the newspaper. Brenner rewound the tape, watched again, counted the seconds, 11, noted the precision of the movement, the choreography that spoke of training, of practice, of tradecraft refined over years of operational experience. She picked up her phone. I need the tech team. Now. And call Washington. Tell them we have something. By the next morning, the wedding tape occupied a specialized playback suite in the FBI's Technical Services Division. Frame-by-frame analysis began immediately. Each second of the 11-second exchange dissected into individual images, enhanced, magnified, scrutinized for details invisible to the naked eye during normal playback. The newspaper became the immediate focus. Forensic video specialists enhanced the image, adjusting contrast and brightness until they could read the masthead. The Miami Herald, August 14, 1983 edition. The front page showed President Reagan's recent remarks on Soviet-American relations, but the newspaper had been folded in a specific way, the fold creating a distinctive pattern, and inside that fold, just barely visible in two enhanced frames, a white envelope. That's not a casual handoff, noted Thomas Garrett, the senior technical analyst assigned to the case. Look at the positioning. The heavy-set subject, we're calling him Subject Charlie, approaches from Alpha's left side, which puts him in the camera's blind spot for most of the approach. The exchange happens in the overlap zone where Charlie's body shields Alpha's hands from most sight lines. They've done this before. The woman in teal, designated Subject Bravo, presented a different challenge. Her face appeared in 17 frames total, but never at an angle that allowed for clear facial recognition software analysis, a technology still primitive in 1983, but available to the Bureau for high-priority cases. She knows where the light sources are, Garrett observed. Watch how she positions herself. The terrace windows create backlighting that washes out facial details. When she turns toward our camera, her hand comes up to adjust her necklace, and the motion creates a slight blur in that exact moment. If I didn't know better, I'd say she was trained in counter-surveillance photography techniques. Brenner studied the frames in silence. 3 people, 11 seconds. A wedding reception with 200 witnesses, none of whom noticed anything wrong, because nothing looked wrong, unless you understood that intelligence operations succeeded precisely because they appeared innocent, that the best tradecraft was invisible tradecraft, that the KGB had spent decades perfecting the art of hiding in plain sight. Can we identify Charlie? She asked. Working on it. The photographer's vest is interesting. It gives him a reason to be carrying equipment, moving around, not engaging socially. We're running the facial data through immigration records, visa applications, known Soviet personnel databases. If he's in the system, we'll find him. And if he's not, Garrett met her eyes. Then we're looking at an illegal, someone with a clean American identity, probably embedded for years, no flags in any database. The kind of operative who's almost impossible to find unless they make a mistake. They made a mistake, Brenner said quietly. They let themselves get filmed. But even as she said it, she wondered, had it really been a mistake? Or had they simply calculated that in a crowded wedding reception, with an amateur videographer focused on the bride and groom, the odds of meaningful surveillance were so low as to be acceptable risks? The KGB was good at mathematics. They understood probabilities. They've been running successful operations on American soil for decades, adapting to new technologies, new security measures, new counterintelligence techniques. They knew the FBI couldn't watch everyone, couldn't be everywhere, couldn't monitor every social gathering in every American city. So they had gambled, and this time they'd lost. The question now, how much had that 11-second recording cost them? The investigation expanded like ripples from a stone dropped in still water, each new discovery creating wider circles of inquiry, connecting dots that had seemed random until viewed together. Subject Charlie was identified within 48 hours. His name, later redacted in all declassified documents, appeared in immigration records as a naturalized U.S. citizen, originally from Argentina, residing in Coral Gables since 1979. His stated profession, import-export consultant specializing in Latin American trade. His travel patterns: frequent trips to Mexico City, Caracas, Buenos Aires, always for business, always documented with receipts, invoices, customs declarations. On paper, he was exactly what he claimed to be. In reality, FBI analysts suspected something far more complex. Look at the timing of his naturalization. Brenner explained during a briefing with her supervisor and two analysts from the Bureau's Soviet operations desk. She spread documents across the conference table: visa applications, residency papers, employment records. He arrives in the U.S. in 1977, applies for permanent residency in 1978, becomes a citizen in 1982. That's fast, but not suspiciously fast. He had the right documentation, the right job, no red flags. But, her supervisor prompted, but his life before 1977 is thin. Birth certificate from Buenos Aires. Check. Education records. Check. But when we contacted his supposed former employer in Argentina, they confirmed he worked there, but couldn't provide much detail. The company exists. The paperwork is real, but something feels constructed. Not fake, just managed. Thomas Garrett from Technical Services had been running parallel analysis on the video footage, looking beyond the three main subjects to everyone else visible in the frames. I found something interesting. Watch this sequence starting at 6:44 p.m., 3 minutes before the exchange. He cued the tape. The screen showed guests mingling near the bar, typical wedding reception chaos. People laughing, drinking, moving between conversations. Then Garrett paused on a frame showing a man in a blue blazer, positioned near a pillar approximately 20 feet from where the exchange would occur. This man doesn't move for the next 7 minutes. He's holding a drink, appears to be watching the crowd, but look at his sight line. Garrett traced an imaginary line across the screen. Perfect view of the terrace entrance where Alpha and Bravo are standing. He's a lookout. Did we identify him? Working on it. But here's what's interesting. At 6:52 p.m., 5 minutes after the exchange, he makes a specific gesture. Garrett advanced the tape frame by frame. The man in the blue blazer touched his left ear, then adjusted his tie. Could be nothing. Could be a signal that the operation completed successfully. Brenner leaned forward, studying the screen. For people now, possibly 5 if you counted the unidentified woman in teal. A network, not just random individuals. And if this wedding reception had been chosen for an operation, how many other public gatherings had served the same purpose? She ordered a comprehensive review of Alpha's movements over the previous 18 months, cross-referencing every public event, every hotel visit, every gap in surveillance coverage. The pattern emerged slowly, but it emerged. Charitable galas, corporate conferences, cultural festivals, wedding receptions, always crowded venues, always events where strangers naturally congregated, where brief conversations and chance encounters raised no suspicions. They're using the city itself as cover, Brenner realized. Miami's transient population, its social scene, its diversity. It's perfect for this kind of operation. You can meet someone at a charity event, exchange materials, and disappear back into the crowd. No need for elaborate brush passes on street corners or dead drops in parks. Just blend into normal American social life. The CIA, when briefed on the investigation, provided additional context. Similar patterns have been observed in Los Angeles, Houston, and New York. Cities with large immigrant populations, active social calendars, venues where Soviet intelligence could operate with reduced risk of detection. The KGB's illegals program had evolved beyond the classic Cold War model of sleeper agents waiting for activation orders. Modern illegals were active, networked, using sophisticated tradecraft adapted to American culture. They're not waiting for World War III, explained a CIA analyst during a joint briefing. They're gathering intelligence continuously, political information, technological data, economic intelligence, information about emigre communities. It's a long-term investment. Some of these operatives might work for a decade without ever being activated for a critical mission. But when Moscow needs someone already in place, already established, already invisible, they're there. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Victor Reyes, the wedding videographer, mentioned during a follow-up interview that he'd filmed another reception 2 months earlier, July 9th, 1983, at the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables. The bride's family had been pleased with his work and recommended him to the Hartmans. "Do you still have that footage?" Brenner asked. "Of course. I keep everything for at least a year, in case clients want additional copies." The July 9th tape arrived the next day. Brenner watched it with the technical team, not knowing what they were looking for, but trusting patterns, trusting the possibility that operational security might have failed twice. At the 7:23 p.m. mark, during cocktail hour, the camera panned across a terrace overlooking the Biltmore's golf course. There, partially obscured by other guests, stood Subject Alpha in conversation with an unidentified man, wearing glasses and a white Guayabera shirt. Their interaction lasted 9 seconds. No visible exchange, but the same precise body language, the same choreographed movements that spoke of training rather than chance. "That's 2 weddings 2 months apart," Garrett observed. "Same primary operative, different secondary contacts. This is a regular communication method." Brenner made a decision that would later prove controversial but operationally crucial. Instead of moving to arrest Alpha and the others immediately, she requested authorization for expanded surveillance, deeper investigation, patience. The goal wasn't just to disrupt one cell, but to understand an entire network, who was involved, how they communicated, what intelligence they were passing, and ultimately, to whom they reported. "If we roll them up now, we get 3 or 4 people," she argued to her supervisor. "But if we watch them, if we're careful and smart, we might get the whole network. We might learn how the system works, identify other legals in other cities, maybe even trace the chain back to handlers in Moscow." The authorization came from Washington with clear parameters. Surveillance would continue through the end of the year, but at the first sign that sensitive intelligence was being compromised or that any operation threatened national security, the investigation would convert to immediate interdiction. For the next 2 months, a dedicated team watched Subject Alpha, and the others identified from the wedding tapes. Physical surveillance, wiretaps authorized under FISA warrants, trash analysis, mail covers. Every tool available to counterintelligence was deployed carefully, professionally, invisibly. The network revealed itself slowly. 7 individuals total, linked by the wedding receptions and other public venues. None of them appeared in FBI databases as known Soviet intelligence personnel. All of them had seemingly legitimate American lives, jobs, homes, credit histories, social connections. But patterns emerged in their communications, in their travel, in the careful way they avoided creating documentary evidence of relationships with each other. They were ghosts living in plain sight, and but for a wedding videographer's camera capturing 11 seconds of footage, they might have continued their work indefinitely, invisible until Moscow decided to activate them for whatever purpose their long preparation served. The Cold War, everyone said, was ending, but in Miami, in those autumn months of 1983, it felt very much alive. The end came not with dramatic arrests or public announcements, but with quiet professionalism characteristic of successful counterintelligence operations, methodical, patient, decisive. On December 18, 1983, Subject Alpha received a phone call at his Miami apartment. The conversation, recorded by FBI wiretaps, lasted 43 seconds. The caller identified himself as a colleague from Alpha's cover profession, suggesting they meet to discuss a business opportunity. The proposed location: a coffee shop in downtown Miami, neutral ground, public, but not crowded on a weekday morning. Alpha agreed. The meeting was scheduled for December 21st at 10 a.m. Special Agent Caroline Brenner, listening to the recording in the FBI field office, recognized immediately what she was hearing. The phrasing, the specific time, the choice of venue, all match patterns identified in KGB communication protocols documented by defectors and previous counterintelligence cases. "It's a warning," she told her team. "Someone in their network knows, or suspects were watching. They're initiating emergency protocols." The decision point she'd anticipated for months had arrived. Continue surveillance and risk the entire network disappearing, or move to interdiction and accept that some operatives might escape. She chose action. The operation, Code-named Wedding Crashers and internal FBI documents moved to its final phase. On the morning of December 21st, Alpha left his apartment at 9:15 a.m., driving his Honda Accord south toward downtown Miami. FBI surveillance vehicles tracked him through morning traffic, maintaining distance professional and invisible. At 9:47 a.m., Alpha pulled into a parking garage 2 blocks from the designated coffee shop. He never made it to the meeting. 6 FBI agents, supported by Miami-Dade police officers blocking access points, intercepted him as he walked toward the garage elevator. The arrest was clean, textbook, over in less than 30 seconds. Alpha offered no resistance. His only words, "I want to speak with my attorney." Simultaneously, coordinated operations across Miami targeted the 6 other individuals identified during the investigation. Subject Charlie, the heavy-set man from the wedding video, was arrested at his Coral Gables home, where FBI agents found $47,000 in cash hidden in a false panel behind his refrigerator, along with communications equipment, shortwave radio components, encryption pads, photographic development supplies, that had no connection to his stated profession as an import-export consultant. The woman in the teal dress, identified as Irina Volkov, later confirmed to be a false identity, was taken into custody at Miami International Airport, attempting to board a flight to Mexico City. Her luggage contained microfilm concealed inside a hollowed-out cosmetics case, a technique straight from classic KGB tradecraft manuals. The man in the blue blazer from the wedding video, the suspected lookout, was located at a small office in a strip mall in Hialeah. When agents executed the search warrant, they discovered material suggesting he'd been operating a communications relay, receiving encoded messages through classified ads in various newspapers, and passing them through what the Bureau later determined was a complex dead drop system using public parks, libraries, and shopping centers across South Florida. By the end of the day, all 7 individuals were in federal custody. None of them talked immediately. They were professionals, trained to resist interrogation, to wait for legal assistance, to trust that their training and discipline would protect them through the initial shock of capture. But as the hours passed, as FBI investigators presented evidence, photographs, recordings, documents recovered from searches, the enormity of the Bureau's knowledge became apparent. The wedding video footage, played during initial interviews, had a visible psychological impact. They hadn't just been caught. They'd been caught because of something as mundane as unlikely as a videographer filming background crowd shots at a stranger's wedding reception. The first confession came on December 23rd. Subject Charlie, facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of decades in federal prison, agreed to cooperate in exchange for a negotiated sentence. His real name was Anatoly Fedorov, a KGB illegal who'd been inserted into the United States in 1977 under an elaborate false identity constructed years earlier. His mission: to serve as a communications specialist and courier for Soviet intelligence operations targeting Cuban exile communities, Latin American political developments, and U.S. military installations in South Florida. The wedding receptions were my idea, he admitted during a debriefing session recorded for counterintelligence training purposes. In Moscow, they teach you to use crowds, to blend into normal life. But American social events are different from Soviet ones. People don't watch each other the same way. A wedding, a party, a festival. Everyone is focused on celebration, not on strangers and background. It seemed safer than traditional methods. How many operations did you conduct this way? Brenner asked. Over 2 years? Perhaps 15, maybe 20. Different events, different cities sometimes. We rotated locations, never used the same venue twice in close succession. It was working well until someone filmed you. Fedorov nodded, a bitter smile crossing his face. We accounted for hotel security cameras, for police surveillance in public areas. But an amateur videographer, hired by a family to record their private celebration, that was a variable we didn't anticipate. Bad luck, I suppose. Or good police work, Brenner countered. The subsequent interrogations, conducted over weeks and months, revealed the scope of the network's activities. While none of the captured operatives had been involved in activities that directly compromised classified national security information, their targets were primarily political intelligence, Cuban exile group activities, and economic data. Their existence confirmed what U.S. counterintelligence had long suspected. The KGB's illegals program remained robust and active even as Cold War tensions appeared to ease. The diplomatic fallout was managed quietly. The Reagan administration, balancing its public rhetoric about Soviet aggression with behind-the-scenes negotiations on arms control and other issues, chose not to publicize the arrests. A private protest was delivered through diplomatic channels to Moscow, making clear that the United States had rolled up a significant intelligence network and would be watching for any attempt to rebuild it. The Soviet response was equally quiet. No public acknowledgement, no diplomatic retaliation, just silence. The professional silence of an intelligence service that had lost assets and would simply begin the patient work of rebuilding, of learning from mistakes, of adapting tradecraft to account for new vulnerabilities. For Victor Reyes, the wedding videographer whose camera had captured the fateful 11 seconds, life returned to normal with surprising speed. FBI agents thanked him for his cooperation, assured him he'd done nothing wrong, and asked him to keep the details of the investigation confidential for national security reasons. He agreed, though for years afterward he found himself scrutinizing crowd shots in his wedding videos, wondering if he'd ever again accidentally documented something beyond the celebration he'd been hired to record. The Hartman D. Carlo wedding video, after being copied and analyzed and studied by intelligence professionals, was eventually returned to the family. They received it with gratitude, unaware of its significance, and filed it away with other wedding memorabilia. A record of a beautiful day, nothing more. Special Agent Caroline Brenner received a commendation for her work on the case, though the details remain classified. In her personal assessment written for the FBI's internal files, she noted, "This investigation demonstrates that successful counterintelligence often depends less on sophisticated technology than on careful observation, pattern recognition, and sometimes pure chance." The subjects were professionals who understood tradecraft and took reasonable precautions. They were undone not by a mistake in their operational security, but by the presence of a recording device in an environment they'd assessed as low risk. It serves as a reminder that in the modern age, cameras are everywhere and privacy, even in a crowd, is increasingly an illusion. The wedding tape itself was eventually declassified in 2008, though with significant redactions. Researchers and historians studying Cold War espionage can now view those 11 seconds, enhanced and annotated, a brief window into the invisible war that continued even as the larger conflict between superpowers moved toward its eventual conclusion. The Cold War would officially end with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. But in Miami in the winter of 1983, it remained very real, a contest of intelligence and counterintelligence, of patient surveillance and careful tradecraft, of professionals on both sides pursuing their missions with dedication and skill. And sometimes, just sometimes, it came down to a wedding videographer, a proud mother who wanted every moment recorded, and 11 seconds of footage that changed everything. The camera, as it turned out, was always watching.